Hello, everybody. Welcome to the BeerSmith Extended Holiday episode. We're going to deviate a little from our regular format today. I've got a panel of three highly distinguished guests, home brewing celebrities, if you will. And we're going to do a roundtable today discussing some popular brewing myths. So this is going to be a little bit different, but I think it'll be a lot of fun. In the end, we'll probably solve all the world's problems by the end of the show. Now I'm going to introduce our all-star panel. Go to the Hollywood Squares view here. First in Hollywood Square number one, I have Gordon Strong, who's the president of the BJCP. He's a three-time Ninkasi Award winner, and he's a Grandmaster beer judge. Gordon, you want to say hi?
Hey, Brad.
Excellent. Good job there. Next, I have John Palmer, who, of course, is the author of How to Brew at howtobrew.com. John, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, great to have you. And finally, I have Denny Kahn, who is, of course, was on a short time ago with batch Barging. And then he's also an AHA governing committee member, and he has a website at dennybrew.com.
I'll take Paul Lindblock.
Paul Lindblock, okay. Excellent. So we're going to jump into some myths here, and I'm going to just throw these out, and we'll see what our distinguished panel has to say. First of all, myth or
Brad,
not?
I just want to thank you, Brad. No one has ever referred to me as distinguished before.
Distinguished, yes. Well, you have a distinguished beard there, Danny. You look pretty good.
Okay, I'll take whatever I can get.
Absolutely. Jump into the myths. First one. Too much sugar makes your extract beer taste like cider. Thoughts on that one? Dan, this is from an episode we did some time ago with Dan Listerman on. And he actually said that it wasn't the sugar that was causing the cider flavor. He said it was old extract. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I'll start, I guess. I've experienced it with old extract, and early on in my homebrewing days, I did experience it when brewing with sugar. But I think it's more of fermentation stress causing the high levels of acetaldehyde and early acetic acid expression that gives the cidery character. So it's not just the addition of sugar that gives a cidery character. It's a stress on the fermentation, I think.
Gordon, what do you think?
I think John's right, but I think there's a couple of different flavor profiles that people get. I mean, there is a stale extract flavor. I picked that up as tangy, not necessarily cidery, and that's sort of a marker for an extract beer for me. But I would agree that people that think beer that tastes like cider are probably getting high levels of acetaldehyde. I don't know. I think the sugar myth is based on what recipes used to look like. If you pick up a book on recipes from the early 70s, 2/3 of the fermentables will be sugar. Nobody in their right mind would use that level of sugar in a beer nowadays. So, perhaps it's cautionary against that. But I think there is a stale extract flavor. It may not be the same thing as cidery.
Okay, Denny, you got any thoughts on this?
Well, yeah. I mean, as John pointed out, there is obviously more than one cause of that kind of flavor. I think that where the whole sugar makes your beers taste like cider myth got started could easily have been as related to poor fermentation temperature control as it could to old extract, because, let's face it, 14, 15 years ago when I started brewing, fermentation temperature control wasn't talked about nearly as much as it is now. And at that point in time, people were just getting away from the can of extract and a kilo of sugar for a recipe. So it would be easy to confuse the two causes. But, Dan definitely convinced me many, many years ago that, old extract with too much sugar can have that flavor. But obviously that's not the only place it can come from.
Excellent. Well, I tend to agree with you guys. I think that that the sugar really does help a little bit drive the flavor, but I think most of it is coming from the old extract, the acetyl. Can't say that right. John, can you say? There you go. Excellent.
Need another beer, Brad.
Yeah, I need more beer.
I regularly
I'm gonna have another sip.
Sugar in a triple, and it doesn't taste like cider.
Exactly right. Yeah, it's used a lot,
right?
Particularly in Belgian beers.
Exactly. I think it's real important to point out that, because I still get this question all the time about sugar causing a cidery flavor. Sugar alone is not going to cause a cidery flavor in your beer. And if you think it is, go drink about any Belgian beer.
Okay, next we're going to jump into all grain. I'm going to talk for a minute about mash out steps. What do you guys think about mash out steps? And of course, the mash out step is at the end of the mash where you take the extra time to raise the grain bed temperature up. Originally, in some of the early books, it was written as, stopping the enzymes was the reason for a mash out. I think most research now says that it doesn't actually stop the enzymes, though. But where do you guys stand on mash out? Mash out or no mash out?
I don't specifically try and do a mash out. Part of that is because since I batch sparge, I'm not concerned about stopping any enzymatic action, assuming the mash out would actually do that. I do typically sparge with fairly hot water that gets me into, the mash out kind of temperature range. But one of the reasons I do that is because of the work that Kai Troyster did, kind of convinced me that I'll probably, at the very least, get better conversion efficiency by doing that. It seems to be true in practice.
Others?
I think a lot of what homebrewers are told to do comes from industrial, or not industrial, but commercial brewing practice, where
right on
on a commercial scale, when you've got a 50 barrel boiler or mash tun, and then you transfer it all to water tun. There's a lot of time delay in pumping the wort across and the mash across, and there are enzymes like the proteases that will survive mash temperatures. I mean, they're at a very high level in terms of activity at those temperatures, and they are denaturing, but they're still active. So if you have to spend, almost an hour pumping mash across that's still at 155, you're still getting enzymatic action. And the concern for a professional brewer in that case would be that, maybe they end up changing the fermentability of the wort or getting an inconsistent fermentability. And that's where a mash out, to raise up to 175 would be useful to denature the amylase enzymes and the protease enzymes, and kind of fix that fermentability and the protein profile. But on a home brewing scale, our transfer times are so short that's really not a problem. So a lot of times I do a mash out just because I can. I have a temperature controlled mash capability, and I might as well hit the controller and crank it up a few degrees and do it because it's available. But I don't know that it's really necessary. Although as Kai says, it probably does help ensure total conversion and fixturing that fermentability. What do you think, Gordon?
I agree with both of what you said. I generally do a mash out, again, because I can, but normally I do the mash out in conjunction with a Vorloff. So I start recirculating with a pump, and then I hit it with heat at the same time. So I'm not doing it because I'm trying to fix the enzyme levels. I'm doing it because what winds up in the kettle is hotter, so I get to a boil sooner. Which means I get done faster. So
highly pragmatic.
Yes. I don't know. The whole idea that your the sugar profile of your beer is going to change significantly after you've already mashed for 60 or 90 minutes. I mean, what's left to convert? I mean, most of the conversion is going to happen in the first 20 minutes or so. You might get another 2% out of your total extract, and that's fine. But I don't care. If I cared about getting more gravity out of the beer, I'd just throw in an extra half pound of grain. It doesn't matter at the homebrew scale. So, I mean, I do it just because it's convenient and it helps me get done faster. But I don't really think it's necessary. If you don't mash out, I mean, you're certainly going to be making beer just fine.
I think it's a lot less sensitive at our scale than on a commercial scale.
Yeah.
One of the proteases.
Go ahead, John.
Okay. One of the proteases I was reading about when I was looking into foam. I forget which paper it was I was reading, but it might have come out of Kuhn's, it might have come out of the ASBC, but anyway, the point was that you could have surviving proteases after the mash that could continue acting on some of the foam positive proteins and breaking them down. And so by not doing a mash out, you could get some foam degradation in the beer. And again, it's because the mash is sitting for a very long time, several hours rather than one, in our case. But we'd have to go to somebody like Charlie Bamforth to get that nailed down.
Well, one of the things we haven't mentioned actually is viscosity, which raising the temperature is said to improve the viscosity during the lauter, which helps your lautering, helps avoid a stuck sparge, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually tend to do a mash out more when I'm brewing with something like wheat that's a little more sticky. Is when I tend to use a mash out step.
I have to question whether it's really the viscosity of the wort that you're reducing there, or if maybe you're getting that last little bit of conversion that's doing it. But, I don't know. I'm just going by my own experience and not really seeing viscosity being much of an issue for me.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think there's a slight advantage, but you're talking about something that's so small that I bet it's within the measurement error at a homebrew scale. Mm-hmm. I really doubt people would see a difference.
Yeah, you're talking about
it's going to be a point or two.
And if I could kind of deviate from our outline here a bit, Gordon, you just used the words homebrew scale, and John brought up the whole thing about the advice that so many homebrewers get being based on what commercial brewers do. And it's not that there's nothing to be learned from commercial brewers, but because of the difference in scale and the difference in the desired outcomes, there's a lot of stuff that commercial brewers do that we don't really need to worry about. I mean, it's like Gordon said, throwing an extra half pound of grain rather than going through all the steps they do to eke out 98% efficiency, stuff like that.
Right.
So I would say, take lessons from commercial brewers, but think it through and see how it applies to your own brewing and test things and see if they really work and make sense for you.
Well, that's why I'm glad John went through the process a little bit about what happens on a commercial level, because I bet most homebrewers don't realize on commercial systems. I mean, most homebrewers probably think, commercial system is just a scaled-up homebrew system. It's not like anything. It's not anything like that at all. So the time you spend in different steps of the process is completely different at the commercial level. And the whole idea that you're going to be pumping your mash around on certain types of systems, homebrewers would never think to do that. So, you can get commercial advice, but you have to understand the type of system it's based on, because it might not make any sense on your system. That's true for homebrew scale advice as well.
Yeah, makes sense.
You hear tips from other homebrewers, and it might make sense on their system, but not on yours.
Exactly. And the other thing to keep in mind is that we're all doing this for a hobby, and so things that might be important to commercial brewers aren't important to us, and things that might be important to one person aren't as important to another. We're all trying to fit this in with our time constraints, and most importantly, keep it fun, because if it isn't fun, what's the point?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Okay, well, I'm going to jump to the next topic. This is from Charlie Bamforth, who John Palmer mentioned just a minute ago, but he made the statement in one of my episodes that you really don't need a multi-step mash if you're using, modern, highly modified grains. He really thinks a single infusion is good for probably 90-some-odd% of your beers. I mean, with the exception of when you're using cereal, for example. Thoughts on that?
Yes.
Yes. John says yes.
Yes, also.
Okay.
I do multi-step mashes. Do I have to? No. I mean, the same grain bill would convert just fine. Usually it's because I'm trying to get a different character out of the beer that I wouldn't be able to get otherwise. Sometimes if I use some European Pilsner malt, it doesn't quite clear the same way that domestic Pilsner does. So sometimes I'll throw in a short rest at 131, and I find that helps my clarity. I often like beers that are dry yet have some body to them. So I'll often do a step mash where I'll convert in the mid 140s and then hit it with something in the upper 150s for a bit at the end. I mean, could I have done the same thing if I just fermented at 147 and just threw in a half pound of Carapils? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I agree with you, Gordon. I mean, I think it's technically we don't need to do a multi-step mash, or we don't need to do a decoction mash, because it's not about achieving efficient conversion with our modern malts. They're so highly modified that a single temp infusion works, and works very well. Where we would want to do a multi-step mash would be if we're trying to adjust the fermentability, or enhance the fermentability, say by doing a beta amylase rest at 145 for a period of time and then kicking it up to 155. Or, as you say, you look with a particular malt, that you have some haze issues, but they go away if you do a short rest at 131. The general answer is yes, single in temperature infusion is sufficient, but as part of why we do this hobby, and part of why golfers use 18 different clubs. I mean, we do it because it's we enjoy the process.
And I think that's probably the best reason to do it. I admit that I have not found as much difference in my beers by doing multi-step mashes as you guys seem to. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. Maybe I'm not as discerning in the results. Who knows what the reason is? But
or maybe your recipes already account for the differences. I mean, you can.
Well, yeah, but I don't really try and do that, Gordon, because I don't know if there is a difference. Winter for me is lager brewing season because I do my temperature control by fermenting in the garage. And every year when I get into lager brewing, I make Dunkels and Pilsners. I mean, those are probably two of my favorite styles to brew. And I go back and forth between doing step mashes and just doing a single temperature mash. And, it's damn hard for me to tell the difference. To the point where I have not been able to convince myself that doing a multi-temperature mash is worth the effort. It doesn't mean that I don't do it anymore because I want to see if maybe I'm missing something. But at this point, I'm not convinced.
Yeah. Well, it's not, as we were saying, I mean, you can do it to change the fermentability. You can do it to enhance a particular characteristic. And as Gordon says, that your recipe may be robust enough that the difference between two steps and a single step in the mash is not significant to the outcome of the beer. But I mean, it depends on what temperatures we're talking about. Frankly, I mean, that's key.
My usual multi-step regime is pretty much what Gordon said. I'll start off in the mid 140s, for maybe 30 minutes, and then get up into the 158 to 162 area for like another 30 minutes or so. That's my normal thing. If I'm doing like a Pilsner or a triple, I may throw in a 131 rest for a few minutes. But, I tend to think that what I'm doing, both recipe-wise and temperature-wise, is pretty normal.
I've seen more of a difference, perhaps, with decoction mashing, the few times that I've tried it, than just traditional mashing, multi-step mashing. Just me, but
with domestic malts, or?
I tend to use continental malts because a lot of times I'm doing a German style if I'm doing the full decoction mash. But I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Well, again, as I alluded to earlier, the reason for decoction and multi-step is when you're dealing with different amounts of grain modification or malt modification. And so if you have less modified malt, then different temperature rests can help unlock those starches from the matrix. Whereas a highly modified malt, that's already been done by the maltster, and it's ready to convert in one step. So, I think we're all staring at the same beast. Charlie is standing on one side of it, and we're standing on at different points around. I think we're all in violent agreement that most of the time, it's a multi-step mash is not necessary.
Yeah.
But then if you know what your target is in a multi-step mash, whether it's change in fermentability or slight change in clarity or other features such as maybe a little bit more maltiness from using a decoction or something, then I think you can achieve those results. I brewed a foreign extra stout this past summer that it was a very high caramel recipe. I mean, I had half pound of 5 different caramel malts in there to get a very sweet stout. But I was playing with my new mash temperature control system and recirculation, and I thought, well, I can rest at this temperature and that temperature, and I ended up with an extremely dry stout. I mean, to taste it, it was a dry stout, and I forget what the final gravity was. I think it was like 6 gravity, 6. So, by spending all that time at the low rests, I ended up really drying it out, increasing the fermentability.
Okay, let's jump to the next topic. This one actually comes out of Gordon's book, his new book, Brewing Better Beer. I'm going to hold up a copy here for the video.
Excellent book.
And
yeah,
I thought this was a pretty interesting technique. Gordon argues in a small section of his book, argues that it might be better to actually steep dark grains rather than putting them in the mash. And Gordon, maybe you could jump in and explain this a little better than I can.
Yeah. So, I mean, everybody should agree that dark grains don't need to be mashed, right? I mean, if you're brewing an extract beer, those are the things that you used to call the steeping grains. So, I mean, extract brewers would steep them. So, is there a need to mash them? My concern is that when you add a lot of dark grains in the mash, you're going to mess around with your mash pH, and you're going to have to compensate that for that. and you have to add other things that can have flavor impacts on your beer. So I was trying to come up with a way of getting a proper mash pH without having to add excessive amounts of salt, because I don't like a lot of salt additions to wind up in the finished beer. So the way I did that is basically remove the dark grains from the mash entirely. You mash as you would a pale beer, and then you just throw the dark grains in after the mash is over. And you can do that a number of different ways. You can add it during the Vorloff. You can steep them separately and add it to the boil. You can even add it during the ferment. It doesn't need to be mashed. So the sugar can go in at any time, just like any other ready to go fermentable.
I thought this was a pretty innovative technique, which I thought I might mention it here. John, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's very true. The cold steeping was, as Gordon says in his book, was kind of brought to homebrewers 10 years ago, I suppose, by Marianne Gruber of Brees, and where she demonstrated in the article different regimens of steeping, cold steeping or hot steeping for a short period of time, and then saving that liquor and adding it to the beer at the boil, or at the end of the boil, so it's just pasteurized. Gordon makes a good point in the book about comparing it to coffee, and are you trying to achieve a very smooth, rich coffee flavor, or are you looking for a little more bite? And some of the different roasted malts behave differently. I believe it was the black roast, Gordon, that you said you got a better flavor out of that by doing the short hot steep and then adding it.
Yeah, I think I might have said that I cold steeped it, but then I added it towards the end of the boil. That it needed to see a little bit of heat, otherwise it had that cold coffee flavor, which wasn't exactly right. So
you also have to. Don't you need to pasteurize it too?
Not too much.
Yeah.
I mean, if you did it all cold, wouldn't you have to worry about contamination as well? Seems
lactic.
like.
Yeah.
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 So you have to have some heat or pasteurization or something, or you run the risk. You run the risk of contaminating it, I guess.
Depends on when you add it, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, you can add it after, there's quite a bit of alcohol produced, and that's going to have an effect.
Danny, your thoughts?
I absolutely agree that's a great technique, and a lot of it depends on what you're going for. Gordon makes an excellent point about if you use a lot of really dark malts and you have to do excessive water treatment, and that can have a negative effect. I've used the cold steeping thing many times, and it works great. But I think that to some degree, too, it kind of depends on the character of the beer that you're going for, like John mentioned. I have some beers where when I would try and do that, they ended up being too smooth and too mellow. And the ultimate solution to that was to throw a little bit of black patent into the mash directly to give it a little bit of bite.
Right.
The other thing is, that since I'm basically a very lazy person, if there's an easier way for me to achieve the same results, I will. And so a lot of times, when I just want the color and not the bite or something like that, I'll just pull out my bottle of Cinnamar and dump some into the kettle. Admittedly, that won't always give you the same flavor as using a variety of dark malts, but if what you're going for is mellowness and color, it works brilliantly, and it's very easy.
I think it's very much style dependent, though. I mean, if you're going for a stout like I'm drinking right now, particularly a dry stout, you want that dry coffee flavor, so it's probably appropriate to throw it in the mash. But you're going for something
a lot of it depends
considerably
on your
milder.
Water too.
Go ahead, John.
A lot of it depends on your water too. I mean, as Gordon said, his water, I suppose, is fairly low in alkalinity, And so to buffer a lot of dark malts in the mash, you would need to add some bicarbonate to the mash or to the water, and you can end up with a very minerally tasting beer if you've added enough salt to buffer that mash for that recipe.
Makes sense.
And so a way to avoid adding those salts is to, as he says, take the dark malts out that would drive the mash pH lower, and wait till the end so that most of the conversion is done, and then add them, get the flavor out, and minimize the impact of driving the pH too low with them, or over adding the bicarbonate.
Let's jump to the next topic. I've got this one's for Denny, I guess. One of the popular myths, and one thing I get a lot of questions on, is batch sparging, and is batch sparging, or we can also maybe even lump Brunabag in there is another one that I commonly hear. Are they really less efficient than fly sparging? And Danny, I had you on a short time ago talking about batch sparging, so I thought maybe you could say a few words about this one.
In a strictly theoretical sense, yes, batch sparging can never be a perfect batch sparge can never be as efficient as a perfect fly sparge. In the real world, since perfect doesn't happen in the real world, at least not in mine, I find that batch sparging can be every bit as efficient as fly sparging, or so close as to really not matter. I know that I get better efficiency than a lot of my friends that fly sparge. I know people who have fly sparged, who have switched to batch sparging, and their efficiency has gone up. And I also know people who fly sparge whose efficiency is better than mine. In the end, I guess the best thing to say is that batch sparging can be very efficient, and so much so that the efficiency of batch sparging should not be a concern about whether or not you want to try it.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
I think at the scales we're working at, the difference is pretty small, really.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
The last, what I'm drinking here, an American Pale Ale, I suppose it's a batch sparge. I use a 3-vessel half-barrel system, and I was making a 5-gallon batch. So when I was recirculating, I just added all my sparge water at once. Just as part of my Vorloff and mash out. All the mash water went in there because it fit and ran off just fine. Hit my targets just fine. Yeah. So, find an approach that works for you and measure your system efficiency and use that in your recipes.
Exactly.
And then once you do that, the idea is that you want to be able to predict the outcome based on your recipe, on your system. If you can do that, who cares what the efficiency is?
Yeah, 1 or 2% doesn't make that much difference. It's not a lot of money. It's pennies a year.
There are many ways to make good beer, and the key is, like you said, Gordon, to find the one that works best for you and lets you make good beer and have a lot of fun doing it.
I think most people just could get better efficiency if they just stirred their mash more often.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's jump into another topic, first wort hopping, which of course is where you had the hops in the early stages of your runnings, if you will. Typically right after the Vorloff's done, right after you do the recirculation. Does that add bitterness or subtract bitterness? I've had people fighting both ways on the forums and also in discussion. Yeah.
Oh, I want to argue against the person who says that.
Says subtract?
Negative bitterness?
Well, not subtract bitterness, I guess. Is it more or less bitter than say, boiling, full boil hops, for example? Assuming you leave it in for the boil.
You have to say how you're going to decide that, too. I mean, the one experiment I did on first wort hopping, the beers actually measured about 10% more IBUs than the beers that had only an equal amount of 60-minute hops.
Yeah.
But when we put them to a tasting panel, there was no definite conclusion that the first wort hop beers were more bitter. It seems to be a different quality of bitterness that might measure higher, but taste smoother, so you don't perceive it as being as bitter.
I think that's consistent with the research. I actually did some research into this because this was a big argument we were having early on in the early days of BeerSmith, was whether it's a positive or a negative addition there. And the only literature I could find actually basically supported what you just mentioned, Denny, is that typically if you take it to a laboratory and measure it, it's going to measure a few percent higher than a 60-minute equivalent boil or equivalent full boil hops. But most people in taste testing actually perceive it to be somewhat smoother and therefore even a little bit less bitter in terms of perception. Gordon?
Yeah, I think I put in the book that if you're calculating IBUs, it's basically a 65-minute addition, but to your taste, it's closer to a 20-minute addition. I'll draw an analogy with the dark grains that we were talking about, the quality of the bitterness versus the quality of the dark grains. Your tongue is telling you how bitter it is, and your tongue isn't measuring that in IBUs. So there's other things going on besides pure bitterness there. It's the whole harshness of the bitterness, the quality of the bitterness. So I think first wort hopping gives you a much cleaner tasting bitterness that registers in your brain, as a perception. It just seems less because it's smooth.
John, you had some thoughts on that too, I think?
Mainly I'm thinking to myself, I have no idea why it tastes smoother. But yeah, that it does seem to be the everyone's experience. I do first wort hopping for a couple of styles. I do it for porters. I do it for pale ales, and the flavor I get, it does seem to be more of a 20-minute, but I don't seem to change the overall bitterness of my beers by doing it. In other words, it doesn't taste more bitter. It doesn't taste significantly more bitter by doing first wort hopping. Although, as Denny said, and then if you actually measure it out, using the chemical method, that it registers a few percent higher. Interesting phenomena, but not sure how to explain it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish there was it's sort of like trying to explain, the Maillard process.
Yeah.
There's things that you can describe them in black box methods, but if somebody says, why does it do that? I don't know.
Yeah.
It does.
I think when I interviewed Chris White, he mentioned there was over, 400 flavors, 500 flavors that come just from yeast. A typical yeast, when it ferments, generates something like 500 separate flavors. So it is really a complicated process.
And all of those are going to taste different when they oxidize.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's jump to the next one. The next one is an interesting myth that I hear quite a bit. And the myth is myth or not, I should say. The myth is you really don't need to boil hops to extract IBUs out of them. You can get the same thing by steeping them at a very high temperature, or perhaps get at least extract some of the bitterness by steeping at a high temperature. Thoughts on that one?
I don't know if I buy that. I mean, if that was true, then the commercial breweries that Whirlpool, that's basically a high temperature steep. Why aren't all their beers measuring out as like 80 IBUs? Because a lot of them hop the hell out of their beers in the Whirlpool. If that was the case, a 60-minute Whirlpool should be like a 60-minute boil edition. And those beers don't taste that way. So I'm skeptical, but this seems to be something that could be measured in the lab fairly easily.
John?
Tom Shellhammer did a paper on it. Well, not a paper on this per se, but he did a paper a couple of years ago where he showed that isomerization does
take place,
increase with temperature. It is temperature dependent. So you go through, at steeping temperatures, at mash temperatures, for instance, you do get some isomerization happening. Even in dry hopping, you get 1 or 2% of isomerization happening, but it doesn't really happen significantly until you get to a boil. I mean, just because you are getting some degree of isomerization at less than boiling temperatures, is that the kind of isomerization you want to get? Do you want to not boil your hops and add a lot more to get an equivalent number of IBUs? Does that beer taste like you want it to taste, or is it more effective and more to your liking to boil the hops, get the IBUs, get a particular flavor out of them, just because you can do something or because you can get some isomerization at these less than boiling temperatures? I don't think you necessarily want to choose that.
Mm-hmm. Danny, your thoughts?
I don't really have a lot to add. I've read excerpts from that same paper that John has mentioned, and, chemically it makes some sense, but I don't really have any personal experience with it. And, my feeling is kind of like I have to boil the wort anyway, so this is not one of those things I'm real interested in experimenting with, other than maybe just as a matter of curiosity. And in that case, I'll let somebody else do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's
jump. One last thing. Yeah. We should make the point for the listeners that bitterness is not only. Isomerized alpha acid is not the only bitterness contribution that you get from the hop. There are beta acids. There's hop tannin, xanthohumol, that is bitter. So by varying how you apply the hops to the beer, you're going to get different proportions of these different bitter compounds.
There's also a whole bunch of aromatic compounds that really get destroyed when you boil the hops. So that's the reason you want to do steeping of hops at the end or
right.
dry hopping to preserve some of those aromatics.
Yeah, a late hop beer is. Those are great beers. You get an abundance of hop flavor and and a different bitterness that you don't get a very harsh, clingy bitterness by doing a late hop. It's a little smoother. Maybe that, and if you had that analyzed by HPLC or something, you may find out that that's not isomerized alpha acid you're tasting. It's oxidized beta acid. That's giving you that bitterness, and that would have you'd perceive it as a different flavor, a different kind of bitterness. But in terms of the IBU test, where they take a sample of the beer, shoot some solvent in it, shake it up, and then do a light scatter to measure how much bitter stuff there is in there. It's there's a lot of different compounds that are express bitterness in that test, in that number.
Okay, I'm going to throw out a related topic, mash hopping. I've seen several articles on mash hopping, which I frankly, I don't see much sense in it personally myself, but I wanted to get your thoughts on mash hopping. What is it? Mash hopping is obviously where you add hops directly to the mash bed. And
rice hulls are cheaper.
Yeah, I don't see... yeah. Given the fact that you're going to get very low isomerization from that hops because it's not being boiled, obviously, and there's very little going into the beer as far as I can tell. Any aromatics are going to be boiled off from the boil. I just don't see any sense in mash hopping, but I still occasionally see people trying to use mash hopping in their beer. Thoughts on that?
I tried it 3 times with a recipe that I was very familiar with, and really couldn't tell that it did anything at all. And after that, I decided, okay, that's it. I've given it a shot. No effect for me.
Yeah, that's basically my experience. I tried it. It didn't seem to do anything except waste hops. I would much rather do first wort hopping than mash hopping. I mean, I get a result from first wort hopping.
Yeah, you can test that smoothness. You can taste that smoothness
Right.
that comes out of first wort hopping.
Yeah.
Well, you talk about first wort hopping being sort of like a 20-minute addition. I think, I'd like to run a test on this sometime, is to try to quantify the level of hop flavor that you get out of first wort hopping so that you could adjust how much you actually use, because it tastes like a 20-minute addition in quality, but I think it tastes like you're adding more hops than you really are. You get a much bigger flavor than the equivalent amount of hops added late in the beer. That's my experience with first wort hopping.
That's the question I get.
Flavor.
I all the time online, I get the question about trying to quantify hop flavor, and man, if you can come up with a way to do that, then you can definitely wear the genius hat.
I think you're running into the 400 flavor type problem again.
Yeah,
because they add so many complex flavors to the beer.
I don't know.
I remember.
I think of doing is doing it in different, like the Cook's Illustrated method. You make 10 different batches and then you just taste them side by side. Say, a half ounce first wort hop, and then you try it against, everything from, a quarter ounce to an ounce in 1/8 ounce steps and see which one is closest to.
That'd make a great presentation at the AHA conference.
Yeah, but that's also like a really tedious thing to do.
Yeah,
and, really.
You need to find somebody that's obsessive compulsive and have them do that, because that's not me. And it doesn't fit my personality type.
Oh, come on.
Gordon, you're saying you're not obsessive compulsive?
No. I'd get bored and wander off. I'm the easily distracted by shiny objects type.
In terms of mash hopping, I remember many years ago, Dan Listerman posted on the Brews and Views forum about a batch that he had made that was entirely mash hopped, nothing else, and by whatever calculation method he had used, it should have had well over 100 IBUs, and he got the beer analyzed, and there were 15. Yeah. So, I think that at least there's something quantifiable about mash hopping there.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's jump to the next topic, rapid cooling of wort. I actually got this question. Several people emailed me about this recently. The theory is that you really don't need a cold break because we've got no chill brewing now, and that just proves that you can make great beer without rapidly chilling your beer. Thoughts on that one? I personally, I'm a big fan of the cold break. I can see the protein come out of the beer. I can see the junk fall out of the beer when I rapidly cool the beer. So I actually like that cold break. I like cooling my beer as fast as I can. Or I should say cooling my wort as fast as I can when I'm jumping to the fermenter. Thoughts?
Well, I haven't done the
John.
Yeah, no, no, I haven't done the no chill method myself. But I've seen pictures and I've seen lots of anecdotes about it. And if cold break is happening, which I'm being told it does, that would say that the break formation is not cooling rate sensitive, that you get down to a particular temperature and it happens. And if that's the case, then that is a reason for that would be a reason to say that we don't need to rapidly chill our wort. Now again, you've got to take other brewing processes and brewing reactions into account. If you don't chill your wort, are you going to have issues with DMS formation? Are you making a beer that has all the DMS precursor boiled out of it, or taken out before you do this no chill method? If not, you're going to end up with a lot of DMS in the beer. So that's another consideration. No, just food for thought there.
Yeah, I'm I've never done sort of a no chill. I worry about what else might take hold in the wort while it's in its. It's like food handling. I mean, it's called the danger zone for a reason. It's it's the temperature of where bacteria incubate. So, if the way I look at it is, the longer you spend hanging out in temperature that favors bacteria before you introduce your yeast, the more chance there is something to go off the rails. So, you can play Russian roulette if you want, but I like stacking the deck in my favor. So, I don't think that you have to chill the wort, to pitching temperature immediately at the end of boil. On my system, it's easier for me just to let it sit for 20 minutes and then run it through a chiller, because I get, all the hops and break materials sort of fall out in the kettle and help filter the beer coming out. But that's my system, and it's similar to what the pros do with a whirlpool. It's the beer's sitting around there at a hot temperature for a while before they run it through a chiller, and they seem to make good enough beer. But the idea that you let the beer sort of naturally cool down to a pitching temperature, I don't know about that.
Other thoughts? Denny, you seem to have some pretty strong thoughts on this one.
Well, I've read a lot of forum posts from people who have tried it, and even from a lot of people who just let the wort sit overnight to get it down to pitching temperature, and they all say that it makes great beer. I haven't tried it. I haven't tried those beers, so I really can't say. I'm kind of skeptical. But to go back to another Dan Listerman story, Dan has reported using Sankey kegs for fermenters, flushing them with nitrogen, putting hot wort into them, and letting it sit and cool, and making great beer. Now, I haven't tried that beer either. Dan at least has some credibility to him.
We had Dan and Randy Mosher on. Dan was talking about making cicada beer with real cicadas, which of course are bugs for those of you who don't know, but it's a great episode to listen to if you go back a couple.
There goes Dan's credibility there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love Dan because every time I talk to him, he's got some wild ideas. He tries stuff that nobody else tries, so I really enjoy talking to him.
I agree. I remember when he made that cicada beer and hearing the whole story back then. So I guess until I try this no chill thing for myself, or I try a beer that's made with it, all I can say is that I'm skeptical.
Little skeptical. I think we're all pretty skeptical on this one. I think I'd have to agree.
Denny's being kind.
I can say bullshit again.
Well,
I'm going to have to bleep all those out.
Yeah, this is a family show.
This is a clean show.
No,
for me, that's clean.
Yeah.
The sort of the self-reported beer quality assessment, I got to take that with a grain of salt, because I've had a lot of beers that people have gave me said, I made it and it's great. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes one person that thinks so.
Well, yeah, I've spent a lot of time studying the assessment of beer quality and stuff, and how preconceptions can really alter your perceptions. And so it's like, I'm sure that they think their beer is great, but I'll pass my own judgment. Thank you.
I never know what to say when the neighbor comes over with that bad bottle of beer and, hey, look at the beer I made at home. I make beer too. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Yeah, that's, yeah. I mean, I can't complain too much when
Did your dog help you brew this?
When I made my first beer, that's great. I made my first with that at all.
Yeah. When I made my first beers in 1987, they were horrible too, but boy, it's come a long way since then. The techniques, the ingredients, everything else.
Amazing.
I'm going to throw out one more topic here, and it's actually not on the paper, so I'm going to throw this out just for the fun of it. But aluminum versus stainless is another timeless debate that I see bouncing around the forum. And, there's all this nonsense about, if you use aluminum pots, it's going to give you Alzheimer's or something. And, I don't know, I guess somebody from the stainless steel consortium put that together. But your thoughts on aluminum versus stainless?
I mean, do you see incidents of, like, a bunch of people running around that have Alzheimer's who homebrewed?
No, occasionally I see some drunkenness, but I haven't noticed any incident of that. In fact,
I don't know.
The first 5 beers I won awards for were all made in an aluminum kettle, so obviously it does not affect flavor in a negative way. Now, what it's done to me mentally, I'll let you guys, decide for yourselves.
Yeah. I can say that Denny has not changed.
Denny hasn't changed a bit. In all these years that we've known him, huh?
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think it's a bunch of hooey.
Well, the medical study, the so-called medical study has been debunked, so I think people need to know that. The whoever published the original thing that said it might cause Alzheimer's has been debunked, and I think most people you talk to, if you go look at the pH levels that we're running at, it's not, they're not running, we don't run the pH far enough to actually do anything to aluminum, basically. So
stomach acid in it.
Yeah, I mean, you compare the pH of Wort to something like Diet Pepsi. The Diet Pepsi's a lot more dangerous, a lot more acidic, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can pick up a metallic flavor if you've got a shiny, bright pot, or conversely a pot that's got tons of oxide in it, and you pour your wort in that, you'll pick up a metallic flavor. But
yeah, the one I worry more about are the porcelain pots where the porcelain's cracked away on it, and you get the raw steel there. But
and it's just a flavor, off flavor that you're concerned about. It's not a health issue.
Yeah.
So
after Thanksgiving, great time to pick up. You can pick up those turkey pots dirt cheap at Walmart. It's probably not a bad time to do that. There's a lot of them on sale here as we get into Christmas season.
Guy turned his house down with the deep fried turkey.
Deep fried turkey. I like deep fried turkey. Actually, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll make one for Christmas here.
Do it outdoors.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, John.
Do it outdoors.
Outdoors. Yeah. Don't
do it in your garage.
Okay.
My cardiologist knows if I even mention the words deep fried, so.
That's right, yeah.
Well, we're actually coming up to the end of the show here. It's been almost an hour, so we're doing a double-length show today, but I thought I'd go around the horn one more time, mention a couple things. I guess I'll go to Gordon first. Is there anything else you want to add, or you want to talk for a minute about your trip down south?
Yeah, I just got back from 2 weeks in Brazil and Argentina. Got to try a lot of homebrew down there, a lot of craft brew. Really, really exciting emerging craft beer market. Reminds me of 20 years ago in the U.S. A lot of great people, enthusiastic. The thing I like about homebrewers in South America is they can't really get extract, so they're all grain brewers. So,
cool.
All homebrewers are all grain brewers in South America. I gotta love that.
Yeah,
that's outstanding. Anything
Plus
else you want to?
Summer there right now.
Yeah, it was. Well, it was. They still got 2 months to go before it gets, really hot according to them. But it was in the 90s Fahrenheit.
Wow.
So yeah, it was basically like August as far as I'm concerned. It was hot.
And Gordon,
I wanted to go down.
They just have their challenges down there with they can get malt, but they can't really get yeast or hops.
Well, Gordon, I want to mention your book too, Brewing Better Beer. How's that going? I hear it's doing pretty well on Amazon.
Yeah, it seems to be doing well. It's always humbling to show up someplace and somebody asks me to sign it. I'm still not used to that.
You know, and I just would like to mention that when Gordon autographed my copy of the book, he wrote, "I think of you every time I batch sparge my rye IPA."
There you go.
Very thoughtful.
Nice.
I'm looking at my
Oh, that's just for
inscription
you,
here.
Eddie.
I got Gordon's book right here, Brewing Better Beer. And John Palmer, you're next. John, you want to say a few words or have some thoughts? And I've got John's book. I'll hold that up too. It's howtobrew.com, which of course is the number one selling book, I think, in the English-speaking world, as far as I know, for home brewing.
Not that big, but yeah, for brewing maybe. It's been doing real well. I've been very fortunate. Looks like we lost the video feed there.
Yeah, the video froze up there, but keep on talking. Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah. I've been very fortunate, and as Gordon says, I mean, it's always humbling and very gratifying when people want you to actually sign it. So
there we go. You're back.
Yeah, it's been great. I'm currently working on a water book. It's called Water: A Comprehensive Guide for Brewers, and I'm working on that with Colin Kaminsky. And our deadline is approaching very swiftly, and we're doing our best to finish it. But I just came back from Sierra Nevada this past couple days ago, and where we toured their water treatment systems. And I've also visited Stone and the brewery and a few others, breweries, trying to make sure we get a good overall picture of how professional brewers treat their water, so we can, educate everyone on some best practices.
Excellent. And finally, the distinguished Denny Kahn. Denny?
I don't have a book because John and Gordon already wrote the books that I would have liked to have written. I know that I'm going to be seeing you guys all at the National Homebrew Conference this June in Seattle. And so for anybody who's out there watching this podcast, I just would like to let you guys know that you should be there also. It's going to be a great event. Lots of beer, lots of really interesting seminars, including one on water, moderated by John.
I guarantee all four of us are going to be there, and I think all four of us are speaking, right?
Yeah.
I'm not speaking this year because I'm in charge of getting the speakers, so I'm not booking myself.
I see.
And Gordon, I haven't talked to you about speaking yet, but you'll be getting an email shortly.
I'm sure Gordon's speaking.
I would obviously love to.
You're on my list, man. So
can you throw out the dates so people can get that on their long-term calendar? It's in June, I know.
June 21st through 23rd this year in Seattle. We have some really, really cool pre-conference events shaping up, including a showing of the movie For the Love of Beer, which is about women in brewing. So it should be a typically great conference.
Fantastic.
It will be, I'm sure.
Well,
the highlight of the homebrew year.
Absolutely. Yeah. I went to my first one this last year, and it was so fantastic. I booked myself, I think, for the next couple of years. I'm definitely going to be there. Looking forward to it.
Great.
It's a great Father's Day present.
Yeah.
That's right. Powered by that.
Or Christmas present. This is our Christmas special. So, and I did want to take a minute to say happy holidays to all of you. Wish you all the very best as we go into Christmas and New Year's. This particular podcast will come out right before Christmas. We're recording it a little bit early, but happy holidays, Merry Christmas to you all.
Thank you very much, Brad.
I toast you, but my glass is empty. So.
Your glass
my glass is empty too.
I scheduled this. I've got a little bit left. A little sip. John's downing the last of his. I'll finish mine.
Bottoms up, John. Bottoms up.
Almost done.
Bottoms up, everybody. Happy holidays to you all, and thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you all being here.
Thank you.
Great talking to everybody.
Thanks, Brad. It was great.
Bye-bye.
So once again, that was Gordon Strong, the president of the BJCP, 3 times Ninkasi Award winner and Grandmaster Beer Judge. John Palmer, the author of How to Brew at howtobrew.com, probably the number one book on Amazon. I should also mention, I forgot to mention Gordon's book, Brewing Better Beer. His new book came out this last year, just in time for the Homebrew Conference last year. And finally, we have Denny Kahn, who's an AHA governing committee member, a batch barging expert, distinguished gentleman, of course. And he has a site at dennybrew.com. And he's also the committee chair for this year's AHA conference.